This evening is going to feature our four-term former governor, Tommy Thompson, and the marvelous author, Doris Kearns Goodwin. I am Paul Fanlon, publisher of the Capital Times, and we're really gratified at this turnout. It would be hard to overstate Tommy Thompson's impact on the modern Wisconsin political landscape. He governed as a kind of a big tent Republican that now feels extinct. But before I get to the program, I want to take a minute to thank our many sponsors and partners. Epic Systems, Exact Sciences, HealthX Ventures, UW Health, the Carbone Cancer Center, Madison Gas and Electric, the Ascendium Education Group, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison for this marvelous space. Thank you. Thank you. Our co-sponsors are the University Research Park, the Century House, the Overture Center for the Arts, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, the Wisconsin Historical Society, the Madison Community Foundation, Cargo Coffee, La Follette School of Public Affairs, Madison College, Leopold's Books, Bar, Cafe, the Forward Theater and Company, and our partners include Hinckley Productions, Civic Media, Wisconsin State Journal, and Madison.com. A note before we get started, our host, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, is committed to freedom of speech and freedom of expression as an essential part of their education mission. It is our expectation that you allow the speaker's presentation to occur without disruption. Any disruptions to the event will be handled swiftly by security. A final note, please silence your phones and refrain from flash photography out of courtesy to others. So, on to the program. Back in 1986, when I considered myself a sage young political reporter, I wrote a long Sunday front page story with many quotes from political experts who predicted that this rather bombastic assistant minority leader in the state assembly, this guy from Elroy, would be hard-pressed to exhibit the political skills to win a Republican primary for governor that year. Well, not only did he win that primary, he beat Democrat Tony Earl, the incumbent that year, and he proceeded to win as most of you know, three more gubernatorial elections, each by larger and larger margins. So I just was interacting with him backstage and reminded him of this. As I've intermittently encountered him over the years, he's been quite good-naturedly good at remembering that story. He was a politician who won and then tried to win over people who didn't vote for him, which is not the way things occur in Republican politics today. This seems long ago and far away before the advent of the politics of resentment. Whatever your ideology, many journalists consider him to be one of the most fundamentally authentic and decent people they encountered in Wisconsin politics. When I see him, he always asks about family, about health, and about how the Capital Times is doing. Our moderator tonight, John Nichols, associate editor of the Cap Times, wrote a column recently previewing tonight's conversation. John noted that Tommy's start in state politics was as a UW-Madison student in 1964 as a volunteer for Barry Goldwater. That's 60 years in Wisconsin politics, and we very much appreciate him being here tonight. Please welcome Governor Tommy Thompson and John Nichols to our stage.
Wow. All right. Well, this is a fine-looking crowd. We can't really see you as well as you can see us, which may be beneficial in both directions. The governor said he has to sit in that chair because some of you know his hearing in one of his ears isn't so good. He said because we're here, he wants to sit in a place where he can hear through his Democratic ear.
My Republican ear went to hell. My Democrat ear still works. So.
Before we get going, I think...
You notice I'm clear to his right, too. John.
Bring your mic up. Keep your mic up there. And you are way to my right.
And you're way to my left.
That's true. In fact, if we do this right, you might circle around and we might end up sitting both in the same place. Before we get started, I want to offer a measure of the regard in which Tommy Thompson is held. That sitting in the front row tonight among our early arrivals were and are and is Supreme Court Justices Karofsky and Welsh Bradley up front here, and Welsh Bradley, Karofsky. And we also have the most progressive member of the legal community in the state, the governor's daughter. Who's been a wonderful, wonderful public servant for many years. Lots of other great people here tonight. I was planning to go row by row, as Tommy Thompson would, to introduce everyone. We even have Lieutenant Governor Barbara Lawton over there as well. And why would all of these people come out to see Tommy Thompson? And it has something to do with the fact that everyone in Wisconsin thinks that they not only know Tommy Thompson, but that they are personal friends with him. And I think he thinks the same way about everyone else.
Everybody.
And
even you, John.
You have made that clear more than once. And so the thing about Tommy Thompson is this. I'm not going to go through the whole bio because there are so many people here who do know him well. But what I will say is this. It is a remarkable career. It is 60 years, starting as a Goldwater volunteer, but 2 years later getting elected to the state legislature, serving 20 years in the legislature, getting elected governor somewhat unexpectedly, serving 4 terms as governor, the longest serving governor in the history of the state, elected to his 3rd term with the largest percentage of the vote in the last century in Wisconsin. 2/3 of the vote for governor of Wisconsin. Which meant that a lot of people were talking to you through the Democratic ear. And then called to Washington to serve as Secretary of Health and Human Services, visionary in his warnings about pandemics and COVID and a host of other issues, served well there, tried to get elected President of the United States, did better than Scott Walker, but not well enough to get to the office. And then, retired to what former governors do, except that he was called back to be president of the university system and oversee the university system at a very difficult point in history, and did so well that no one wanted him to leave. But in the best tradition, he gave it up at a certain point, although I suspect that if he was invited back, just about everyone would applaud. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome again Governor Tommy Thompson.
That was too nice. Thank you.
And let me, one last note, and I promise not to talk anymore. A note on partisanship. I don't try to characterize myself, but some have said I'm on the left. And I have been in dozens of settings with very, very conservative folks, right-wing folks. And Tommy Thompson has always welcomed me graciously and made sure that I was not just there from the sidelines, but a part of things, talking to people and stuff like that. And I have to tell you that I think that is one of the reasons why you have been so successful politically, is because even when you disagree with people, even when you're on very different pages, you hold out this faith that 2 things can happen. Number one, you can get along. And number 2, if you hang around with them long enough, you might even convince them to come across the line. I want to tell you, the first, we have definitely gotten along. The second, you're still failing.
There's still hope. Hope springs eternal.
Governor, the Republican Party was founded in the state of Wisconsin in 1854. by abolitionists and immigrants and reformers. And Wisconsin is not just the birthplace of the Republican Party, but a state with a deep Republican tradition. What made you a Republican?
Growing up in a small town, small city, Elroy, which you can call up somebody, get a wrong number, and still talk for half an hour. You learned, that you had to depend upon yourself. Everybody was friendly, everybody helped you, everybody was very engaging, and so on. My father ran a small grocery store that I worked at. And every Friday night, the farmers would come in because my father was on the county board and was chairman of the Road and Bridge Committee.
Career politician.
What?
Career politician.
Yes.
Running in the family.
Except that...
Bring that mic up a little.
Except that every single night we had to read the Capital Times. Let's say the newspaper of choice for my father. And every Friday night they'd come in, and I was amazed by the ability of these farmers to be able to decide what is the best for their township, what's best for the county, what's best for the city. And my father was always in the middle, serving beer and hamburgers and whatever Friday nights. And I just learned politics, and I learned to love it. And I learned to really get excited about that. And my father was a Republican, my mother was a Democrat. And it was a Republican community. And I came to the University of Wisconsin, and everybody was a Democrat. And I felt, not everybody, but pretty much.
What year did you arrive?
I arrived
Wisconsin?
in 1960.
In 1960. So, and you immediately ran into Dave Zwiefel, who's over there on the side there. And
I love Dave Zwiefel.
I
He
know you
doesn't
do.
love me. He's never written anything nice about me, but I think he's still.
Yeah, it's true.
I still think he's a hell of a guy. But anyway, most everybody was, to the left and was pushing that way. And I thought coming from Elroy, I thought I wanted to be different. And so that is why I became a Republican. No, it
Literally,
wasn't philosophical. It wasn't anything. It was the fact that you're supposed to be a Democrat because you're at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I said, no, I'm a Republican. And basically, that's how I became a Republican. My father leaned that way, but basically I was pushed into a corner, and I thought, no, I want to push back. I want to be independent. I want to be a Republican.
There you go. And it's different times, I might suggest.
Oh, God, was it ever.
Is it true? I think you told me this once. Is it true you had a socialist uncle?
Pardon?
Did you have a socialist uncle? Or like a lefty uncle?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather?
My grandfather, Charles Dutton, he loved Bill Evue. Absolutely revered.
Bill Evue, founder and longtime 50-year editor of the Capital Times.
And he ran as a progressive Evue acolyte for the Assembly. Came in 7th out of 7. But everybody called him the socialist of the town of Plymouth. And he was quite liberal and Irish American. And his great-grandfather came over here in 1869, was the first white settler, and I still own the farm that my great-grandfather homesteaded in 1869.
That's good. You still get out on a tractor pretty often.
I run a big farming operation, thank the good Lord, and a lot of luck. I have 1,700 acres. We have 150 head of cattle. I had the whole family out last Sunday picking grapes for wine and hay, and we have.
I got to stop you. Are we going to have a Tommy Thompson wine?
No, but it's the Little Red Schoolhouse wine from Ripon. It really is, yes.
It is. That's your grapes?
No, yes, my grapes go into it.
Wow. Okay. Well, we got to keep
It's not good wine.
It's not good wine? No. Don't be saying that.
You wouldn't serve it to your best friends, but no,
I might.
no. But knowing you, if you brought some Republicans over, you might
I would serve it to them.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's traditions in that regard, but that's just, so. Okay, I'm with you here on this, but you realize that global warming is going to kind of, make this such a hot place. I don't know if you acknowledge global warming, but it's real, and it's going to make this such a hot place that then the grapes are actually going to, get better and better, and so you may ultimately yet be a successful wine maker.
Oh, I'm not a winemaker.
I know, wine.
I just grow.
I'm just telling you.
Grape.
Okay. I know she didn't jump in with me on the global warming concern.
No, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to let you hang yourself.
Okay, here we go. So you're at University of Wisconsin. You decide to be a Republican, and then you really throw all in because you got to tell me the story of this because I just know it peripherally from talking to you a lot about it. But like you contacted Barry Goldwater. You got in touch with Barry Goldwater and said, "Hey, come to Madison. I can show you how to win this town."
No. That's a conclusion. But I started the Collegians for Goldwater.
63 about or something like that?
63. In your heart, you knew he was right.
Yes.
Okay?
That was his slogan. But in your guts, you know he's nuts.
No. Once again, you're wrong, John. But he was just a hell of a nice guy, really.
He was a great
you would have
man.
liked him.
I would have loved him.
You would have loved him.
I would have loved him.
He was a very pro-choice Republican, and I thought the world of him, and conscience of a conservative. He was the real deal. And I got a chance to meet him, and I started the Collegians for Goldwater on campus. And Mort Allen, the next year after I got Barry Goldwater, ran against me and beat me. My first election loss was on the Madison campus.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The organization I started, he defeated me.
Yep.
Shows you I should probably have not gone into elected politics, but
we're going to get to that in a second. But Goldwater came here.
Goldwater came here, and I was going to put him on campus, but they wouldn't let him. So I took him to the Capitol. And he gave a speech in the Capitol. The Capital Times was there covering it. Wrote some awfully nasty articles about it.
I don't believe that for a second.
But it was a wonderful thing. He didn't stay long. He knew that he was going to lose, and he thought he was going to lose, and he didn't think Madison was the place that was going to turn the tide. Even though I told him it would, I said, "If you're coming to Madison, we could carry Wisconsin."
Right. Totally.
But it didn't work out that way.
He didn't follow your advice.
I think he carried Arizona.
Actually, he carried a group of southern states.
What?
He carried some southern states.
Yeah, not many.
And he carried Arizona. It wasn't all that big a win. But you did bring him here, and it is absolutely true that Barry Goldwater, in that year, 1964, the year after John Kennedy was assassinated, had Kennedy lived, it is well known that Kennedy and Goldwater were very close friends.
Very close.
And that they wanted to run against each other and go across the country and have something akin to Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Right.
And that speaks volumes to what a remarkable man Barry Goldwater was.
Barry Goldwater was a pilot.
Yep.
He was an inventor. He was an author. He was an individual that you could sit down and discuss just about anything. And he would tell you exactly how he felt. And he would go against the Republicans if he thought they were wrong. He'd go against the Democrats more often than not. But he was just a wonderful human being. And he got a bad reputation because he was considered hard-right conservative, which he probably would be a rhino today.
Today, I think he might be a little to the left of the, yeah. But that's an interesting thing because I think it's fair to say that Goldwater took some pretty hard hits in the press. That slogan, that thing I repeated a moment ago, that notion of in your heart,
He's right.
He's right. In your guts, he's nuts. It was the in your heart, he's right was the Republican line. The in your guts, he's nuts was the Democratic line. And an awfully lot of the media really amplified statements that he made that sounded very extreme. Yeah. Extremism in the defense of liberty and stuff like that. And that brings us to a challenge. You, during your time in politics, and we'll go back into the timeline in a moment, but let's talk about the media a little bit, because you, in your time in politics, had a very interesting approach to the media. Today, it's often very combative, but even when people criticized you, you tended to keep talking to them, right? And on some theory that you could get through to them eventually. And so you ended up, I think, getting surprisingly good press through most of your career because you maintained those relationships.
I think the story that probably fits it the best was, but first, let me just say one thing about Barry Goldwater. His wife, Peggy, was the head of Planned Parenthood in Arizona.
Trust me. Yeah, I know.
And so, I mean, just...
Well, he finished off his career back in Gabby Gifford's down in Arizona.
Absolutely.
So, I got you, you know. So now we're about that media stuff and your sly charming of the media.
I always thought it was necessary for me to try and educate the press and try to, in the right way. I thought that they were the ones that were going to help sell the programs or not. And I wanted to make sure they understood where my position was. And I think the story, I think it's true because Whitney Gold told me. She was on the editorial board of the Milwaukee Journal, and they came out and endorsed me. And I was shocked because it was the first...
Mistakes were made.
Yeah, mistake was made, whatever. But she told me the reason that they endorsed me is they had an editorial board meeting, and they said, Tommy Thompson has done everything we've asked to do and has been honest with us. Why wouldn't we endorse him? And she convinced the editorial board to give me the endorsement. And that was really unbelievable that the Milwaukee Journal would do that.
Yeah, it's a remarkable compliment.
Capital Times never did that, but that's the only paper that...
I realize that. And you know that Whitney Gould...
David Schweifel, is he still got a vote on it?
What's that?
Schweifel still got a vote?
Yeah, he's the boss. No, except for Paul Fanlin's in charge, but we'd like to defer to Schweifel if we don't just kind of summon up the ghost of Evu. That's how the thing works. But it is important to point out that Whitney Gould did work for the Cap Times before she went to the Milwaukee Journal. So obviously she lost the thread, but I remember in 1994 when you came that year. That was the year they endorsed you. Yeah. I remember when you came that year and sat with the Capital Times editorial board, and I believe your first words were, "I know you're not going to endorse me,
right?
But I'm going to sit here for as long as I can and try and convince you that you're wrong," and you did. And the fact of the matter is that while we did not endorse you that year, we said strikingly nice things about you in the editorial. And I think that that's sort of one of the tricks that a lot of politicians in both parties today have lost sight of, that if you keep talking even to the people you disagree with, they will ultimately have a hard time really disliking you.
That's very true. I mean, if you sit down and talk to somebody, and I find this all over this state and all over this country, people like to talk. They like to be listened to. Not many people listen anymore, and I'm a listener. And I love trying to educate people about my politics and my beliefs, but I also want to listen to yours. And I think I could be a better governor, a better leader, a better president of the university if I listen to all sides. And that's what I've always done throughout my whole life. My father taught me this. He said, "Tommy, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion and you'll get along." And I've always believed that. And every time I go any place, I always try and get people to talk about themselves, because nobody ever asks it. What is John Nichols really like? I don't want to get into that now. But
I think it's trouble there.
But
you know my uncle.
I know your uncle. Nice man. Yeah.
Good man.
And he voted for me. I don't know why you don't.
I think every single time he voted for you. We're still working on him.
He said the same about you.
I know. It's an ongoing. Yes, it is true. Although my mom is on my side.
Your mother. He told me your father was a moderate.
Yeah, my dad was moderate.
But your mother influenced you.
Totally. She got close to me at that key point.
He says that you used to go to meetings at 8 or 9 years old and just get engrossed in politics.
I was engrossed in politics, yes. And I have not
The wrong side, but you were engrossed.
This isn't about me, okay? So So you like to talk to people, you like to engage, even as a very young guy. You graduate from UW and the law school, and instead of sticking around Madison, you race back to Elroy, and you challenge one of the senior members of the Wisconsin State Legislature, a guy whose record goes back into the 40s, in and out of the legislature, very, very...
16 years.
Yeah, everybody knew this guy.
And everybody endorsed him and supported him.
Well, there you have it. And so here's this kid just out of the hippie town of Madison coming back to Elroy, knocking on doors and saying, well, I want you to vote for me. How did you did win that election. How did you do that?
I was 23 years of age. I had won 3 credits to graduate from law school. So I went to summer school, and I was tending bar at the varsity bar. Yep. Bouncer of the varsity bar.
Were you a bouncer, too?
I was a bouncer, yeah. And I attended bar, went to law school. Louis Rommel was this gentleman's name, 16 years from Adams County. And he decided that I wasn't serious.
Yeah, your phone is ringing there. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Wasn't serious. So he took a cruise to Alaska in August. And
so your opponent decided to go to
I didn't
Alaska.
think I was serious because I was in law school. Why?
Yeah, and you're this kid, right?
Just a kid.
Yeah, the grocery store owner. The grocery store owner's kid.
Grocery store from Elroy. Yeah. And so I went back to Elroy, and just think of this: the Juneau County Republican Party, where I grew up, endorsed Louis Rommel.
Sure.
And put a paid ad: "Do not vote for Tommy Thompson from Elroy."
Really? They bought an ad saying, "Don't vote for this guy"?
Well, the businessman in Elroy, who was a competitor of my father, says, Louis Rommel is a great guy. Tommy Thompson is nobody. Don't vote for him. In Elroy, my hometown. My father was so mad that he went out and started campaigning on me. So
that was the only way you could get your dad to campaign.
Get my father. So my father would give me $10 a day. $5 for gas. I borrowed $1,000 from the Bank of Elroy and bought a $200 car that had 200,000 miles, a 1958 Ford that had all the tires blew out during the campaign, and I ran on highway safety. The car couldn't pass any kind of an inspection, but I ran on highway safety. I went all over, knocked on every door. Nobody had ever done that in Adams, Juneau, Marquette. We didn't have numbers, we had counties then. And if there was a church service, I went to church. And if there was a wedding, I'd go to the wedding. I said, how would you like to get your picture taken? True story. I went to funerals that I didn't know.
But everybody likes it when there's a crowd that shows up for the funeral.
I showed up, and probably distasteful. They had a funeral handing out literature, but but I was dedicated. I was going to win.
Yeah.
And so I would campaign. I'd go door to door during the day, till 8 o'clock at evening, and I didn't have any money, and I didn't have even a girlfriend, and all I had to do was go home to my parents, so I would go to the bowling alleys from 8 to 12. Met with the farmers, bowled, and shot pool and drank beer.
It's not bad. It's good. It's good politics.
And lo and behold, Louis Rommel came home. I remember this. The first time I met him was on Labor Day at the Harrisville Bratwurst Festival. He came up to me and he says, I hear you're really campaigning hard. I said, yes. He says, I hear great things about you. And I said, well, thanks, Mr. Rommel. That's very nice of you. And he says, I'm not going to be around all that long. He was, I don't know, but he's in his late 60s. He says, I'm going to win this time, Tommy, but you can stick around and you can probably run in a few years and win the seat. I said, well, that's awfully nice of you, Mr. Rommel. Exactly that conversation. And so he went and left, and I went around he went home. He left the Brat Festival, and I went and shook hands. And lo and behold, I won all 3 counties, Adams, Juneau, and Marquette.
That is a good political story. And we don't have time to go through every one of your campaigns, but essentially it was the same.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that you never really stopped campaigning.
I never do.
Now, I know you don't, because I saw you walk in here tonight, and he literally greeted everyone at the magnetometers, by name. And so, but you got yourself into the state legislature, probably not all that welcome because you had beaten one of their buddies.
They all endorsed him.
Yeah, I know. So
I didn't have any money. They gave all their money to Louis Ramel. I didn't have any money.
One of the youngest legislators in state history showing up, having beaten one of their buddies. And over a period of time, you became the Republican leader in the legislature.
Right.
And in a period when Democrats generally
Controlled everything.
Right. And you...
Well, you've got to realize that's also when Whitewater happened and Nixon.
Oh, yeah.
And everything.
Well, Watergate. You are such a good Wisconsinite. Perfect Wisconsinite, yes. And so you had a lot of troubles. It was politically challenging and stuff like that. And so you get into the 80s, and because you, truthfully, you say you kind of stumbled into the Republican Party, but you became a relatively consistent conservative.
Right.
And that put you in a position where you had to say no all the time. Not always with success, but you got to be known as Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Dr. No. Tell people about that nickname.
Well, the Democrats controlled everything, and Republicans could not get any legislation passed. And so my job was to stop the Democrat legislation. So I read the rule book.
You became so good at it.
I read the rule book forwards and backwards. I knew everything. I knew more about the rules in the assembly than the speaker did. And I used those rules of procedure to stop legislation. And the Democrats would want to get something passed, and I would stop it. And so they gave me the moniker, Dr. No, you're against everything, Tommy. And I guess I was, because I wasn't going to give them a victory.
And you were against a lot of stuff, and you became, it was an interesting thing, because here's one of the things where politics gets a little ugly. They called you Dr. No, and a lot of times when the Democrats talked to you about you, they portrayed you as not the sharpest tack in the box.
If you remember...
Keep the mic up.
If you remember, the chairman of the Democratic Party was a woman from Briggsville. And she says, Tommy's IQ is less than my bra size.
Yeah. They weren't always that nice to you. Although, in comparison to politics now, it seems very pleasant.
The only newspaper that wrote that story was the Cap.
Would be the Cap Times. Yeah, we like to report all the facts. But so here you're Dr. No, and they're like not being overly pleasant to you, and then it comes the 1986 gubernatorial race, and the Democrats are in a pretty good position politically and stuff like that. It's the second midterm election of a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, and that's usually the time when the opposition party does very, very well. So the Republican candidate for governor that year was sort of supposed to be a sacrificial lamb, right? You know, you weren't supposed to. That wasn't supposed to be one where you went. But you won a Republican primary, and then you went into that November election against Tony Earl, and you really mounted a classic Wisconsin campaign. You went everywhere. You reached out to a lot of folks who weren't always used to being reached out to by a Republican, and you won. In fact, that was a pretty remarkable, that was a breakthrough moment in the whole country, around the whole country.
I was the only Republican to beat an incumbent Democrat governor that year. It was a Democrat year.
It was a very big Democratic year, and it was kind of an amazing victory. And you came into the governorship again.
Once again, John, everybody underestimated me. They underestimated me when I ran for the state assembly. Everybody said I couldn't win. And also they said I couldn't win the primary. Jonathan Berry was supposed to win it. I was this hick from Elroy.
Two-bit, I think.
Two-bit hick, yeah, you're right.
Two-bit hick from Elroy.
Two-bit hick from Elroy. He never went.
Remember all of these.
Anything that was bad about me, you remember. And so Tony Earl and the Democrats really underestimated me. I never stopped campaigning. And the night of the primary, I think Tony made a big mistake. He was my friend. Tony and I were very close.
You'd been in the legislature together, right?
In the legislature together, we drank beer together, we played euchre together, and it was just, he was a wonderful gentleman. And he wanted to get out and congratulate me. And so, the night of the primary, on the Milwaukee TV stations, they put a split screen up with Tony Earl congratulating me, and we started debating. Why Tony ever did that, I don't know, but it helped me.
Raised you up.
Raised me up.
Yep.
Tony gave me an opportunity to articulate my views, and he congratulated me. So, and then Tony didn't do anything, didn't raise money because he didn't think I had a chance. The Democratic Party didn't think I had a chance. And right after that, the money started flowing in. Mm-hmm. And, excuse me.
Got so many phones. This guy's got it.
That was Jim Clauser from heaven.
Oh, put him. Yeah, it's a good man calling in to watch over you.
We went there, and I didn't have any money. And I brought Jim Clauser. I asked Jim Clauser to run my campaign. He said, absolutely not. He said, I'm making too much money, and I'm not going to go back into government. And finally, he decided to come over. I said, all I want you to do is make sure I don't go in debt. All you have to do, Jim, is go over to the campaign and make sure we always have money in the treasury. And do not spend anything, because I have no money, and I will not be able to pay back any political debts. So that was Jim Clauser's particular...
As his duty.
And so we signed up for public funding back then. I think we were expecting 307. We spent a whole $1 million on that whole campaign.
Which today seems like nothing.
It was nothing.
Sadly, because it should still be that way. But
yeah.
Just to make my pitch for campaign finance reform. But so we get you in there as governor, and you did a very interesting thing at the start of your governorship, early on in your governorship.
It was extraordinary.
Well, you started hiring Democrats. You started taking Democrats out of the legislature and giving them jobs.
Tim Cullen. Tim Cullen was going to run again. Majority Leader Tim Cullen, a great guy,
Tim Cullen from Janesville. He was a very brilliant, very prominent Democrat in the legislature, still very active on campaign finance reform, I might add. Yeah. But you plucked him out of the legislature.
Wrote a book.
Written some very good books. You plucked him out of the legislature and brought him into your administration, which was weird.
It was really weird. It was really weird because the Democrats control both houses, and they expected me to be just a one-term governor, and they thought that they would just stymie me on everything. And so Jim Clauser and I had a meeting. I said, what we should do is find a real high-ranking Democrat to come into the administration and help us. And Clauser says, I really know Tim Cullen. Do you think we should ask him? I said, absolutely. And so Tim Cullen went over Jim Clauser went over to see Tim Cullen, and he says, well, what cabinet post do you want? Jim says, which one do you want? Transportation? Yeah. Health and Human Services? Yeah. And so Tim Cullen says, let me think about that. Tim Cullen was going to run against me in 4 years. He was the heir apparent to my campaign, or to run against me. And anyway, so on Friday, he said, I got to go home and think about it. On Sunday, he called Clauser and he said, if I am Secretary of Health and Human Services, I will come. This is on Sunday. On Saturday night, he had dinner with Tony Earl and Tom Loftus.
Mm-hmm. Democratic leaders in the legislature.
What?
Yep. Or Democratic former governor, leader of the legislature.
And Yeah, that's true. And so I said, we got to announce it early, because if the Democrats find out about it, they're going to persuade them not to do it. So on Monday at 12 o'clock, we had a press conference in the Assembly chambers, and Tim Cullen was at the table, and all the press came in and was wondering, why is Tim Cullen at the press conference? And I said, well, I got some news to make, and I'm going to appoint Tim Cullen, the majority leader in the state Senate, as my new Secretary of Health and Human Services. You could have heard a pin drop. Everybody wrote about it in the state, and everybody, it was, topic number one on the news. And so.
And I think that is the point at which a lot of people realize, people who had been maybe underestimated, you realize they might have to take this governorship seriously.
Yeah.
And we don't have time today. I wish we did. We'll do this again next year. But we don't have time today to go through every aspect of your governorship. But I wanted to go to one thing that I was around for, and it was quite amazing. This country has wrestled for centuries on the issue of health care. You, as a very conservative Republican governor who had been reelected with good margins, decided to tackle the issue of health care at a point where Bill Clinton, a Democratic president, had failed at the national level, and Republicans who had tried it had not gotten very far. And you did BadgerCare, which I still think is an amazing act and an amazing accomplishment.
Mike Dukakis, thank you. Michael Dukakis said that was the smartest and the best health care program in the United States. Why did Tommy Thompson push for it? Grew up in Elroy. Farmers come in, small business people come in. They don't make enough money to buy health insurance. They work darn hard. If you're really poor on welfare, you can get health care. If you're really wealthy, you can get health care. If you're a middle income, you can get health care. But the poor individual that works on the farm or in the grocery store, my father never had health insurance. And so the best way to do it, I thought, was I'll help those people. And that was the genesis, to help hardworking individuals that could not didn't ask the government for anything and could not afford it, but needed it badly. And that was the genesis for BadgerCare. And I talked to Joe Leon. Joe Leon was then my Secretary of Health and Human Services. And we sat down and we carved out that program and we passed it. And it still today is an outstanding program. And it's a nice program because Democrats and Republicans both rally around it and both support it.
And I know people whose lives it has saved.
Absolutely.
Working people right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's no question about it.
It continues to this day.
Yeah.
And again, I would like to go through every aspect of your governorship, but it is hard to do that because there's so much. There are things I really disagreed with you, and we'd talk on the phone sometimes about welfare reform and go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I remember when Becky Young was pushing you on something, and one time you called me because she was pushing for some sort of transportation, aspect of your welfare reform, and you called me up on a Friday afternoon, and you said, tell Becky Young, we'd editorialized really rough. We'd beaten the hell out of you on that issue. And you called up and said, tell Becky Young she got her buses. And in all of these things that you did, these different initiatives as governor, some were controversial.
God almighty.
No, turn that phone off. You're just like a kid. Do you want me to turn it off for you? I'll do it.
No, I got it off.
All right. Take care of it there.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm
So,
don't take my time away from me.
I'm not taking a minute. I'm going to let you go a couple minutes over.
Let's get on with this.
Let's get on with it. Okay, so you're doing all these things as governor. One of the most interesting things about you is that you actually sometimes admit you were wrong. And you, during your governorship, you did a lot of investment in prisons and expanding the prison system. And what was remarkable was decades after, or a good long time after, you actually, I remember, spoke up very boldly and very publicly and said that it had gone too far.
It had. We got to realize individuals are going to get out of prison. The worst thing in the world is to put somebody in prison, and 70% have either a drug or alcohol problem, and we don't remedy it. And so what do you expect when they get out? They're going to have alcohol and drug problems, and they're going to break the law. Not all of them, but some do. And I came to the conclusion that it'd be much better. What I really wanted to do was build one of my prisons into a university.
You want to turn one of the prisons that were built during your time to become a university.
To turn into a university and vocational school, and allow prisoners to sign up for it, get a course, and have the university and the vocational schools teach courses there, which they are now. But I really would like to set it up so that you matriculate through the years and get a degree, and you have the business community hire those individuals. And have a completely, and we could change the system. The second thing I would like to do is I'd like to set up a...
You can applaud that. That's pretty good. Were you inspired to any of these visionary ideas by Kelly Thompson?
Kelly,
is your daughter who state public defender for many
Kelly
years?
certainly influenced me. There's no question about it. But we also argue a lot. But she certainly does. She's a wonderful defense lawyer. I would like to do something really dramatic. I'd like to turn one into a university or a vocational school and have them get their degrees. I also would like to, we have too many individuals in prison that really don't need to be there. I would like to set up the judges that have already finished their terms on a panel to go in and try these cases again in prison and see whether or not the sentences should be modified.
Wow. So develop a whole system that might be able to get people out of there quicker, and people who are ready to leave, get them out of prison.
Put them in. You got all these retired judges sitting around waiting to get picked up on some arbitration or something.
I know. They need work.
And
got a couple of them. Yeah, I know.
Ann Bradley, number one.
Yep, she'd probably run that program for you.
Yeah. But just think of that. If you put them in there, I bet we could reduce the population considerably. But we could do a service. And we could allow people, you know, that if they've done something heinous that shouldn't be eligible, fine. But there's so many that have been put in prison that if they had the opportunity and had evidence that they have restored their integrity and they're able to be clean and from drugs and alcohol and have good work habits, why not let them get out and work and let these judges have a decision? Are you turn your telephone off?
Bad as you. I know. I wanted to make you feel okay.
Oh, yeah, I know you did. Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is great. This is a great idea. That is a flat-out liberal idea. You know, no, it's actually some of the best criminal justice reformers right now are libertarians and
people
some
like Kelly Thompson and myself.
People like yourself, and
just think about that idea. Though.
I've got it in. I'm as soon as it's done, I'm writing the editorial. But before we do that, we got a couple more minutes here, and I want to go through a couple things. You loved being governor. I mean, and there's an outside chance you could still be governor if you had just not given it up. But George W. Bush asked you to come to Washington to run the Department of Health and Human Services. You came out there in the midst of your fourth term to D.C., and you were, I will tell you, let's just say you were an outlier in the Bush administration in some ways, because you really seized that office and sought to do some amazing things with that office, including warning America about the potential for pandemics. Tell me about that.
I got to tell something else because I'm running out of time, and I want to.
I'm going to get you.
The best thing I've ever done in government.
Okay.
Kofi Annan was UN Secretary, and he came down to see me. And he came down to see Colin Powell, and he says, I've got this idea about setting up a global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And Colin Powell says, we can't get it done without Tommy. So on a Sunday afternoon, Kofi Annan, Colin Powell, and I went out for lunch. And I loved the idea. He said, if you can get $100 million from Washington, we can start this program. And Colin Powell said, what do you think, Tom? I said, I love the idea. He said, can you support it? I said, absolutely. And so we called George W. Bush up on a Sunday afternoon, his golf day. He never wanted to meet anybody on Sunday afternoon. But Colin Powell called him, and we went over to the White House on a Sunday afternoon, and we sat down. Colin Powell, President Bush, Kofi Annan, and Tommy Thompson. And we hammered out, and George W. Bush said, I'll give you 45 minutes. An hour and a half later, we had an agreement that he would come out the next day, on Monday, and announce that he was going to put in $100 million into this global fund. And I thought it was great. Congress wanted to up it, and they put in $200 million.
Yeah.
And that was the start of the global fund, which has saved millions of lives.
That's right.
And it's a fantastic program. And I was just happy to be at to do it. And I knew it was not going to run unless you had good leadership. So I ran to be the chairman of the Global Fund. And I was not the first chairman, I was the second one. The first one was from Africa. And he was not able to raise the money and couldn't do it. And I came in and we raised $5 billion over the course of the time, and now it's been up to $8 billion. And that program, the Global Fund, has saved millions of lives. So if there's one thing that I had a real great consequence for humanity, besides BadgerCare, it would have to be the Global Fund, and I wanted to get that up.
I appreciate that. That is still, to this day, that's the thing. When people talk about, even most liberal Democrats talk about George W. Bush, they say, yeah, there's this thing he did with the Global Fund.
My idea.
All right, so credit.
He gets the credit, but I did the damn work on it.
Get yourself elected president. You can get the credit, okay?
I couldn't even get out of Iowa. How could I
know, you did run for president. We're not going to, out of politeness to you, I'm not going to discuss your presidential run. But, which should have been, by the way, in 96. You should have run in 96. If you'd run in 96, you would have been a very viable candidate.
I would have been a viable candidate. I waited way too long.
Yeah, mistakes were made. And let's take a moment to talk about presidential politics, because right now, pretty much everybody in this room really is liking you, right?
Do you think so?
I think they're feeling good about you.
No, you want to screw it up, right?
I'm going to screw it up.
You want to talk?
Yeah, well, we'd be remiss.
You want to talk about Trump, don't you?
Yeah, There you go. And let's.
Hey, have you been eating dogs again?
All right, sir. So, look, this is the thing. You are a Republican, a deeply committed Republican, and you are supporting Donald Trump for president this year. The crowd is, and we're going to respect the dialogue here, but I had when we asked for questions and stuff like that I hate to tell you, the number one question was not, why are you such a great guy? It was, there are so many things that we do like about you. Why are you backing Trump? And so I'll give you a chance to address that.
Nikki Haley didn't get the nomination. Donald Trump is the nominee for the Republican Party. I'm a Republican. I support the Republican philosophy. Is there everything that Donald Trump supports? No. But between Kamala and Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump is a better candidate for president. I know that, but
Trust me, we recognize that this is not the most popular statement that Tommy Thompson will make today. But it's important so you are one of those folks who, as a Republican, ultimately believe in, and this is clearly the case, that there are a lot of Republicans who've stuck with him, although there's some prominent Republicans who have made a break.
That's right.
And you have chosen not to.
We have two political parties that are going to be vying for the presidency. There are other parties, but right now it's either going to be a Republican or a Democrat. I think right now the Republican Party deserves a chance, and I think the Republican Party has better ideas for running this country than the Democrats, and that's my philosophy, and that's why I support Donald Trump. Simple as that.
So let me ask you, there are many.
And plus, I would like to be able to influence.
You would like to get in the door.
I really think.
No, it's.
I really think that there's too much partisanship, and I say this to candidates on both sides of the aisle. We have become so polarized in this country, and I really dislike it. And I tell Republicans and Democrats, I say, run as an R and a D. But once you win, join the W party, the winning party, and start solving some of the problems. And Ronald Reagan told me this, and I'll never forget it. He said, Tommy, it is amazing how much you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit. Now, there are good ideas from Democrats, good ideas from Republicans. In this state and in this country, we need to come together, and you can have, I want you to work as hard as you possibly can for your candidate, Kamala. I'm going to work hard for my candidate, Donald Trump. But at the end, I want us to come together because this country has serious, serious problems. And we cannot afford to continue to be so partisan and so political that we don't talk to each other and we don't get something done. We need to work together, and that is why I'm involved. I hope to be able to influence the Republicans to work closer with the Democrats and get something done.
Will you work with them to accept election results and respect democracy? Both sides.
Yeah, both sides.
But that's because that's such a concern right now.
I believe in the Constitution like you do, John. I believe in democracy. I believe in bipartisanship. I believe in two political parties, or as many political parties we have. But I believe once it's over, let's join the W party and let's start winning and getting something done. This world is in bad shape right now. You look around, and you got the Ukraine, you got the Israeli, the Palestinians, the Iranians, the Chinese. All of these things, we could end up in a very serious war. I don't want that. I do not want anybody to get so pushed so far that somebody decides to go nuclear. That's the end of civilization. And I think every one of us have got a role to play, and I'm going to play that role as long as I live to the best of my ability to be able to stop that from happening.
In 2002, my friend Paul Wellstone died in a plane crash.
Yes.
He was the senator.
I went to his funeral.
I was going to go there. Give me a moment.
I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. My friend Paul Wellstone was killed in a plane crash. And he was the very, very progressive senator from Minnesota. And there was a challenge with the question of the memorial service because Paul Wellstone had just cast his vote against going to war in Iraq, which was the right vote. And he had also, been at odds with the Bush administration. And through a roundabout way, I learned that the Wellstone family and other folks were a little concerned about who was going to represent the administration at the funeral. They weren't dictating it or anything like that, but there was, it was the subject of some, because things were so divided, and it was such a complex time. And the word came that the administration's representative at the funeral would be Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tommy Thompson. And the Wellstone family and others said, thank you. They said this is the person who they knew could come there and show respect for this very, very progressive senator, and who in fact had worked with Wellstone.
I did.
On mental health issues and on a host of other issues in the administration. And that was a remark, I remember.
And he voted for me for my confirmation.
Yeah.
I went to see him.
And he didn't vote for everybody.
He did not,
Yeah.
no.
And so I was struck by, I think that is an element of your story, and I remember being with you at that funeral, and how poignant that was, because in this very, very deeply divided country, maybe it's that old Irish side of you,
Must be.
but you show up for those.
I do.
Yeah.
And I cry.
You cry.
Yeah. I got this crying problem.
Yeah. Let me ask you, as we round it out here and talk about all of this politics and all this, we didn't touch on a million things that we could have and should have touched on. I'm interested in your sense of Wisconsin going forward, because I think at the end of the day, though, you've served in these national levels and you've served in you've been engaged with international issues. I noticed that well on in your life, when you were asked to come back and run the university system, you did. I have very little doubt that if you were asked to step in as governor tomorrow, you would do it. In fact, they'd probably have trouble getting everybody out of the way. You'd be rushing in so fast. But at some fundamental level, you have this deep love for Wisconsin.
I do.
And I want you to talk about that a little bit as we finish off.
How can somebody at age 5 put to work polishing eggs in my father's basement with no windows and think, you have no chance of accomplishing anything, and be able to go to the University of Wisconsin and see this great university and see this great state of Wisconsin and have the opportunity to lead it is amazing. I love the people. I love Wisconsin, the best state in America.
That's right.
And I love the opportunity to serve. I'm a public servant, and I love it. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change one darn thing, except I would have run for president in '96.
96. You got yourself elected. Ladies and gentlemen, Wisconsin governor, probably forever, Tommy Thompson. Thank you so much, Governor.